Isn't it good that we can be so optimistic about women's football? I mean, we've been enjoying the last 2 days and hearing lots of really good things, and I think what it is, it behoves us to keep going with it. And if we look at the words on screen, I think they're very relevant to us. That's a photo taken at the Women's National Soccer League semi-final at Portland Thorns, everybody's favourite women's club, unless you're from one of their opponents. But it's a future-looking thought, and they did actually go on to win. Part of what we're talking about is breaking through barriers, and hopefully also the removal of barriers so we don't have to break through things all the time. So you're probably thinking, well, what are these women's standing committees about? Well, they're actually originally built into the reform of women's football in Australia, and Victoria, as part of its restructuring, set up a women's standing committee under its new system, and the role is one of advising the board and management of football in Victoria. Hopefully it's got some more roles as well. In thinking conceptually about what we want to do, how I frame it is to say that organisations need to engage with women. FFV needs to engage with women, and women need to respond. And it's exactly the same at clubs, whether we're talking about those women administrators or coaches, and also in the system of referees. So Women's Standing Committee is going to be part of that engagement. We need everyone to be proactive. Now, I want to digress a little bit because I thought if I'm going to be the very last actual speaker, I'll get you to think about something. And we need heroes, don't we? Well, there's a hero. Do we know who this is? Any clues? I've picked someone out of the 19th century. She's a statistician. She's done something, which, in fact, she has a relevance to this conference. She was the inventor of the pie chart. Oh, well, that's a hero for you. Well, no, actually, it's someone who was part of changing the world. It's Florence Nightingale, and who completely revolutionised nursing and health. And she has some interesting things to say. I hope that rings some bells. If we're not a little bit discontented, how are we going to make things change? So think about Florence and her statistics, because that was the thing that helped change nursing. And here's the other thing, because what we want to do today is not just have enjoyed 2 days of warm inner glow about women's football, but we actually want to take action, and we want to do things when we leave here. We want to carry on with some momentum, and hopefully in Victoria the Women's Standing Committee is going to be part of that, and working, really importantly, working with Helen, working with the network that has been established, the Women in Football Network, and to take those things and continue to act so that we can build up the confidence and incentive for women to actually take on those roles that we want to see them in. So, as Florence said, we want to bring these things into action, not just words. And for a little bit of inspiration, earlier today, I'm not sure how much people really realise, but there's been some fantastic successes in women's football, and Sun Wen, who was up here today, was there at that. That is over 90,000 paying customers at the 1999 Women's World Cup at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. And that's the exciting kind of ambition we should have for ourselves for women's football. So when it was mentioned about having a Women's World Cup final here, we've got to say no. Where do we want the Women's World Cup final? At the MCG. That's how we want to think. We want to think, how many roles should we be? Well, what areas are we focusing on? Well, we want to focus on a whole range of things. So it's not just about players, it's not just about administrators, but it is about them. But it is about referees, and it's about the whole range of official roles. So let's set some big targets for ourselves and let's go at it with some enthusiasm. I mean, we've got people from a range of times on there, hopefully a few of you, including now, we might say. So hopefully we've got some enthusiasm for growing it all. So yes, now that's been a word in the news lately, hasn't it? Yes. One of the things we want to be yes about in the Women's Standing Committee, let me just check. Oh, I've got years. That's the little timer down there. We want to say yes to a number of things. And I think the number one thing we want to say yes to is having women involved. So for the Women's Standing Committee, we've got some good guys involved. We want to see more women involved. Partly, well, because they bring the women's perspective, which is so critical to all of this. They bring a care factor, because if you don't care, you won't pursue it. You won't be like Florence and nag the British military authorities till she could actually save lives. And because the more we have women in these roles, the more we'll have women in these roles, which is what we want to get to, more women in those roles. Of course, accompanying yes has been no, and so it's important when we do look for women in these roles that we do the right thing and we make sure that we don't have people who are tokens. We don't want to have women and then not listen to them. And we certainly don't want to bring people into roles for which they're not suited and they can't make their contribution. So let's listen closely to the people we encourage into roles and not throw them necessarily into the tippy top on day one, but actually, and then set them up to fail and then say, oh, well, we won't get any more of those women. Make sure that what we're doing, and I know this is something that Helen has certainly got her eye on, is about the sorts of things like mentoring and giving people opportunities to fit them on that journey to get them to the top. So that's the no. Lots more yes than no. I just love a Portland Thorns photo. So there's a few more. Now have a look at that. Those people are active supporters. And can I tell you that 150 of those crazy people went from Portland to Orlando to support their club in the grand final. And that's like flying from Broome to Melbourne. And I want to see the day when we see that sort of thing here in Australia, because we've got to set our sights high. And we want to see women in those kinds of roles because they are World Cup winning coaches. But to do that, we've got to have all sorts of women in these roles, from the little kids, and get those. If we ever talk to Helen about the percentage of coaches, we know it's teeny tiny, which makes it that much harder to get to the tippy top. So let's get our women involved, coaching the little kids, but then give them every chance, every opportunity to develop so that they can take on roles. These are our two women W League coaches this year. So, Women's Standing Committee, we have been formed, we have met, we have got started, and so these are some ideas about what we need to be effective. We actually do need to be demanding, but we need to be smart. We have to be evidence-based, and we also have to be prepared to speak truth to power and realistic. At our meeting, we talked about what we want to focus on to begin with. There's, you know, the list is a million miles long, isn't it? So what do we start with? Well, we think that what we need to start with is to look at our competitions, and in particular the competitions that are coming up for next season and the season after. We need to make sure we're supporting women's leadership, and coaching is in there as one of our important ones, and infrastructure almost goes without saying. It's recurred again and again. So, where does this leave us? Well, we have 7 people. That means we have 5 vacancies. That means that we're about to commence a process to get those 5 vacancies filled. We want to do that as soon as we possibly can, and what I'm expecting is that very early next week we will put out a call for expressions of interest for those 5 vacancies. We do need to see them spread around Victoria. We do need to make sure that there is a bias towards having women on that committee. So I'll put my hand up. I would like to see those 5 vacancies filled by 5 women, the type of people who have been able to find some time out of their life to come along to this today, and the people that are working so hard in and around Victoria and our regions. And as I'm reminded by one of my club colleagues, to be proactive about looking for women from diverse backgrounds as well. So we'll have all those things. What I'm asking from you here today is to have a look at yourself and say, would I be a great contributor to that? Or would I just be a good contributor? We'll have you then too. Or do I know someone who I should encourage? So I want to be biased towards women, and I especially want to be biased towards having relatively young women, because this can be part of developing people up in governance roles and in administrative roles that can take them forward into the future in other roles in and around football. So can I leave you with those couple of thoughts to think about yourself or someone you know to take on one of those vacancies when we make the call, and also to make sure that when you go out of here you've got a bit of a pledge that either at your club or association you'll try and put these things into effect. The Women's Standing Committee is going to be here as a resource. We're going to ask you stuff, and we really want you to reply when we ask you, whether it be a survey or whatever else, and hopefully also to be active in that Women in Football network that is going to be up and happening and working really collaboratively with the board and management at FFV. So, you know, let me leave you with that to-do list, and I hope you've enjoyed our experience here today. And of course I have to leave you with an inspirational quote, well, by someone who is who's come through the system and is continuing to contribute, because I think this is what it's about. Thank you.